I'd like to welcome JoAnn Lowell. Lowell is how you say your name? Lowell?
Okay. Lowell.
Lowell, okay.
Yeah.
So JoAnn's background as a traditional midwife began through her journey with her architectural thesis, The Place of Birth. It took her into dozens of different birth cultures around the world in the 1980s, including the Netherlands, where half the births were at home and half in the hospital. She landed in an Indigenous community in the high Arctic of Canada, where she became a traditional midwife after she gave birth at home to her daughter. She took part in bringing the profession of midwifery into recognition in Canada in the 1990s. She became a professional breathwork practitioner and a change agent for the birth practices in communities. She's lived in around the world. She's an international speaker, author, filmmaker, architect, permaculturist, singer, and ceremony leader with a birth house in Western Canada where over 130 babies have been born. So thank you so much, JoAnn. I got the Lowell and the JoAnn. We're looking forward to hearing your talk. Do you have any? Are you going to share slides with us, or do you need, or you're just going to talk? Okay, that's fine too. Okay, excellent. Well, I'm going to turn my I'm going to mute myself now, so now you won't be able to hear me, and I'm going to turn my video off so people can just focus on you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, but I will still be here.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Connie. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I join you today from the unceded territory of the Sinixt Nation, First Nations here in Western Canada. Because of their stewardship of the land that I'm on, we have pure air and beautiful waters and clear mountains and trees. I join you as a Celtic woman, and I have a full remembrance of being burned at the stake and buried alive for being a midwife, for being a wise woman who knows the ways of the earth and who knows the ways of the mystery of birth. By the time I finish my presentation, the way I've introduced myself will hopefully make sense to you. So the name of my talk is We Come Full Circle, Valuing the Feminine is Key. So for myself, I care deeply about humanity and the messes we're in and figuring out how to get out of those messes that we're in. And so what I've come to understand is the key to the violence in Western medicalized birth is the devaluation of the feminine, devaluation of the earth, and devaluation of Indigenous peoples and practices, people who remember the original instructions to respect and protect the land, protect the waters, and protect the life givers. So at the core of this assessment is the key to the answer. And that is in how we come to value our bodies, how we come to value embodied experience, how we come to respect traditional perennial knowledge, how we come to respect the earth and follow the natural ways of birth, that the problem is the answer. So I have practiced and taught this for 35 years here in Western Canada. So before we proceed, let me just take a moment and define for you how I'm defining the feminine when we look at it as a set of values. And I'll first make it really clear that you do not necessarily have to have a female body or a male body or any particular gender of a body to be able to uphold feminine values. Of course, we are women who give birth, so obviously it's going to have more impact. But when I define the feminine, I'm speaking about a way in which we are relational, not transactional. In a capitalist society, so much of what we do is transactional, and we see the same with westernized medicalized birth. Relational really takes into account who's really here and what's really happening for them and having a sense of relation with them. Feminine values include being embodied, being in the body, that we actually are present here in the body. Many spiritual traditions have said we go up and out, and feminine values say we come in and down and we feel ourselves in our body. I can't fully birth my baby if I can't feel what my experience is. And again, another feminine value is to respect the life givers, respect us as life givers. The value of nurturance, to nurture our way, as opposed to blame or to push ourselves so hard as to be nurturing, to have kindness and care. to respect the inward mystery, that there's a lot that's within us, deep within. And finally, to be fierce protectors of the next generations. And of course, by that, I mean, we have to protect the life givers if we want to protect the next generations. So a little bit about me, as Connie was saying, my background actually I came into birthing by learning about different birth cultures and traveling the world. And what we come to realize is, just like a fish is in water, and you take the fish out of the water, well, the fish doesn't even know how to exist without the water. That's like us within our cultures. We hardly even know or have an awareness of the cultures we're within. And usually it's when we step out of our culture that we suddenly say, hey, maybe some of these particular things we're doing aren't really worth preserving. So with culture, we must untangle our true values from inherited collective ideas of what has value and what does not. A big pet peeve of me, so here in Western culture, especially those of us in North America, one of the ways that we get acculturated about birth in our culture is through Hollywood movies. And it's a big pet peeve of mine that, it's always this scenario where the woman's standing in the kitchen or at the office and suddenly starts to howl and the baby is coming, and now there's this crazy drive in the vehicle with the husband, and then all this screaming in the hospital. And if I'm in a theater, I'll say, it's not like that, because it's not like that. So when we are present at a birth, the most common sound that we will hear is for 10 hours, for an entire night, for an entire day. And there may be moments when we have a detour, there may be moments when we are pushing our babies out, but generally speaking, very active birthing is very deep and inward and meditative, and that we have the capacity, if we allow our women within our culture to be deeply embodied in their own experience. I also want to just take a moment to speak about, in Indigenous cultures, which is where I started as a birth attendant in the high Arctic with Dene and Inuit peoples. And in any Indigenous culture, generally speaking, it is relational, that there is this way of being in relation. And so when I lived in the North, I wanted to learn Chipewyan and Slavey languages. And the language actually tells you so much. It's not like you can just say, there's the tree, a tree, that tree. There is no such thing. It would be the tree with the golden leaves that faces the sunrise, that is next to the flowing waters that go north, next to the stand of rippling leaved trees. And that would describe one tree. And then the tree over there would get a whole other way of being described in its language, because it's relational. And so this brings us, of course, into birth, that we can't have a one size fits all for all women, that if we actually are really in right relationship with the woman who's in front of us, then there's no way that we would be transactional in our kind of way of being birthing with her. And even though this isn't part of my presentation, I would be remiss if I did not mention what's happening in the US right now with the Supreme Court. I'm starting to get emotional here with the very real potential of Roe versus Wade being struck down. And you can just see that does not, if I take the test of what is feminine values, it does not pass the test. Is it relational? Does it take into account the different circumstances of different women? It does not. We know that it'll be women who are living in poverty that are going to suffer the most. Is it embodied? No, it's not embodied. Those who are making these decisions are not at all most of them are not at all even involved in their own bodies of having this kind of experience. Does it respect life givers? No, it does not. Is it nurturing? How do we bring forth, healthy babies in a healthy way? Is by actually nurturing the mother, not by putting her in jail or telling her she's wrong. Is it kind? Is it caring? No. And does it fiercely protect the next generations? One side may argue that, but how is it protecting the future generations if there is not the means and the money and so on to have forced pregnancies and forced births upon us? So that's just my little side piece I just really need to say, because it's unbelievable that we're here again, thinking that if we lived in a culture that values the feminine, values feminine values, this would not even be up for debate. So I'm going to just switch gears here now. And part of my background, I think Connie mentioned, is I'm a breathwork practitioner, and I combine this in my work with women who are birthing. And so we ask the question, how can we help women as life givers to remember the wisdom in their own bodies and to help them to stay present in an embodied state through birth? And so I'm going to give you a little experiment and ask you to actually join me in this. It's participatory. So key to that is breathing. And any of us who are involved in birth know that breathing our way through is the way through. But this is also true in all aspects of how we make decisions, how we move forward within our systems, and how we come to become more involved in valuing feminine values. So let's just take a moment, and if you'll just be with me for a moment, wherever you are sitting, you might have been sitting quite a lot all day. So just feel your feet on the ground. And if it feels comfortable for you, you can close your eyes or just focus on a spot on the floor in front of you. And as you are there, just take a moment and scan your body and notice what you notice in your body. Notice if you have any tight places, if there's any places that are not relaxed, any places that are relaxed. Notice anything that arises. And as you're noticing, take a moment to notice your breath. Notice how your breath enters your body and how your breath exits your body. And it's not a thing of the mind, but actually feel it in your body, noticing your breath. And as you notice your breath, I'm going to ask you to start to pay attention to your inhale and notice the length of your inhale. And so in these next breaths, I'm going to be asking you to double the length of your exhale in relation to your inhale. So if your inhale was the count of, say, 1, 2, 3, allow your exhale more or less to be the count of 6. So it may be something like inhale 1, 2, 3, exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, keep going, inhale, and then double the length of your exhale, more or less. We're not trying to get exact here. And so start to breathe in this way with a nice, long, extended exhale. And as you breathe, notice in your exhale, notice if there's any tight shoulders or anything that you're feeling, that you can just simply let that go on your exhale. And then replenish yourself on your inhale and let go on your exhale. And you can just take a couple more breaths in this way, breathing in on your inhale and doubling the length of your exhale, letting go on your exhale. And just one more breath as you breathe in. Just let go on that exhale. And then as you let go, you just might wiggle your fingers, your toes, but just now just take another scan and notice your body and notice what you feel. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I'm not sure if people have access to the chat, but if you want, you can actually just say what you notice in your body, what you're aware of now. I know that I have access to the chat, but I don't know that everybody does. But typically, when we do this kind of a practice, this could be everyday life, or this could be something, okay, my shoulders are feeling less tense now, great. And there we go. Oftentimes people will say they feel a lot more relaxed, or maybe calm or present. Now imagine that you are a woman who is birthing. And as you are birthing, do you want to be birthing with your shoulders and your body tense, or might you want to be birthing with a very relaxed body? Or if there's some kind of a detour you need to be taking in the course of a birth, might you have an easier way of meeting those challenges if you're in a relaxed state? I teach this kind of breathing in an international program called Conscious Breathing in the Classroom, and to kids of all ages. And we just find that it completely changes the lives of classrooms and kids. So if you're university students watching, you may find that that's the case for you. Is tell, okay, here we go. Here's Asia is feeling present. There we go. Beautiful. Yeah. So here we find that with a relaxed breath, we find ourselves present, we find ourselves relaxed, and this can be in the everyday life. So here's a simple thing that I do. A lot of the births I attend are at home or here in my birthing house that I have, but I also attend births in hospital. And it can come to pass that an obstetrician might enter the room, and I can get a sense that an obstetrician is just ready to jump in and is tense in their body. And without me saying a word, I'll slide up next to the obstetrician and I'll take 3 breaths. And another breath, and another breath. And by the 3rd breath, the obstetrician will be breathing with me. And suddenly the obstetrician will look around and snap out of wherever it was that they were in automatic to go in and save lives, and suddenly look around and say, oh, this is a beautiful birth. Oh, look at the beautiful light, and oh, the mom is doing great, and this music is beautiful, because now they've become embodied in their own experience instead of an out of body or in the mind experience, and they now can be present and find that the vast majority, 95% of all women giving birth, do not need to have an emergency medical intervention, because 95% of us have everything that we need to give birth naturally and normally. So I'm going to move into another piece of the work that I work with, which is how we change outcomes by gently working with birth trauma or birth imprints. And I do this work with parents to be in the period of time when they're pregnant, and through the actual birth itself. And any of us who've been in a pandemic in the last couple of years, there's a beautiful doctor, Dr. Gabor Mate, who works with trauma, and he has to say that the way that we've seen any of us and all of us in the way we've responded to the pandemic is our trauma response, the way we respond to trauma. And we couch the conversation around trauma in very gentle and kind kinds of ways. And so it's key to understand that mammals, all mammals, it's normal to get activated in our energy. And then if we were still out there in the wild, we would have a way to discharge that energy. And the way that we live in modern life, we would maybe fight or flight or freeze. But oftentimes we don't do that. And so that those pieces of trauma get caught in our body, particularly in the fascia. And that's partly why we're in this kind of state like this a lot of the times. And so what we do with trauma release is we really come at it. We just say, it's a fact. It's not a problem. Let's just all accept that we've all got little bits of trauma flitting around in our bodies. And I don't need to know too much about the story. I just simply want to know that I have a way of releasing it. And it can be in very, very, very simple ways. So with the birth imprints that I work with parents to be, mothers and fathers, we always take a look at when a mother is about to or going to be giving birth, that she herself wants to know a little bit about how her birth was. Because in every single example of every single birth I've ever been in, I see that people are activated in their own birth imprints. Now, what do I mean by birth imprints? I mean that particular threshold that we came through when we were born. It feels to the infant coming through. It's the first vital threshold that we come through. And the conditions at that moment can feel like life or death to that infant. And we all have been born of mother. And so an imprint could be born of a C-section, or it could be cord around the neck. It could be an easy birth. It could be a normal birth. It could be a late birth. It could be a forceps birth. It could be any of these different kinds of ways of being born. And what we find, this is a combination of my work with breath work, where oftentimes it's common to remember your own birth and actually go through the experience again. And then also with my work with birthing with mothers, is that the how we're born can predispose us to certain ways in how we are in the world. So here's an example. I was born late, and every single school day, appointment, work date I arrived at was late. But it wasn't a simple thing. I was outside the door crying every single day of my life, and wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't change it. And I couldn't change it from my mind because it was something so deeply imprinted in me. And so once I started to do the birth imprint work, we find that the way in this work I do, we accept that the way that we were born, in terms of the imprints that we have, there are lessons that our soul came to learn, and there are gifts that came from our birth. And we can see that in those birth imprints. So when I did my work on being late, I find out that, oh, well, I'm actually very much present, and I'm very much in God's time as a way of being. And that, somebody who has maybe been born in breech presentation, for those who may or may not know, that's either bum or feet first, that, they may run into problems of always seeming to be kind of going against the flow. But hey, the gift is they are someone who may have original ideas that are completely out of the box because of something in the way that they're made up. And so I'll tell you how I stumbled into this was there was a woman who was 2 weeks overdue and going to birth here in my home. And we were giving her the idea about having a little bit of cod liver oil to be able to start to induce the beginning of labor starting. And she was adamant, no, absolutely not. She was a veterinarian. And she was, forget it, that has to do with the digestive system. It's not anything to do with the uterus or the vagina. So I'm just not going to do it. And so I trusted what she had to say about how she felt about it. And because she was staying here, at some point over a cup of tea later, I asked her, tell me about your birth. How were you born? And she said, well, I was induced. So her own birth, she actually, her mother had some kind of oxytocin or some form of some kind of a cocktail to get her contractions going. And I said, oh, that's so interesting. And so we actually started to look at that birth imprint. And that birth imprint can be that the person may have trouble getting things started, or they may need some help to get things started. But they don't want to ask for help to get things started because it was done to them. And so she and I, we worked through some of these affirmations and breathing along the lines that even in moments I have trouble getting started, deep breath, I know it's okay to ask for help. I know it feels great to get started. Or when time is upon me, that's a good time to start. So we literally spent nothing more than maybe half an hour on these affirmations. And literally the next morning she woke up and she said, you know what? I want to have some cod liver oil today. And she did. And she went into labor and she birthed naturally here, a beautiful baby boy. But the difference is the day before it was in a procedure that was going to be done to her. And in the relational way, in the way of being kind and nurturing, in listening to those feminine values, was to meet her where she is and to make friends with what this is that's going on for her. And then finding that now she actually is choosing to be in this position to take this cod liver oil to get started. And so then what can happen is that during an actual labor, then there may be moments when I just might reaffirm some of those affirmations that we've already worked with. And you know, any of us who are involved in birth, there are certain moments when we've pretty much exhausted every possible thing we can think of. We've been walking the stairs 2 at a time, and we've changed the energy of the birthing room, and we've, you know, done all kinds of different things. There might have been a little bit of an internal movement for the baby and so on. And nothing seems to be helping us stop labor. And the thing is that in what I'm suggesting here is one piece, not the whole answer is, but we work with this person relationally in terms of where it is that they're stuck inside themselves. And we help unstuck that in a very kind and compassionate way. So this brings me to really then, how do we change systems? Because as Connie said, my background is in architecture and I spent a bit of time in anthropology as well. And I'm always looking at how do we change systems, and some of it is through consistency and persistence. As I mentioned before, it really is important that we know what our values are in the systems and the cultures that we're in, and that in fact, if there are some values that don't fit anymore, that we need to release them and we need to replace them excuse me, with you know, excellent values. And so part of the way of changing systems in my work has been to do it through diplomacy and modeling behaviors, well, and activism too, and I'll say a little bit about that in a moment. So one of my elders is a Blackfeet Indigenous man, and when we are in the sweat lodge, when we come to the healing round, he will say that healing is not about getting rid of something. Healing is not about curing something. Healing is about coming into right relationship with whatever it is that we're dealing with and making friends with it. And so obviously at the core of devaluing feminine values is the patriarchy itself. But when we say this amorphous thing, the patriarchy out there, it just seems like some big giant hippopotamus or something. And how are we going to shift that or change that? And so for myself, it's like, how do I meet the patriarchy that lives within myself? How is it that I might uphold unconsciously some things of the patriarchy? Then I need to be rigorous with myself and to change. And so when we're in the hospital system, you know, who am I working with, and how is it that they are stuck within the patriarchy and want to be brought over into these feminine values? So a really key example is nurses, and I'm generalizing here. I know things are changing all the time. But, you know, I started this work 35 years ago, and I don't think it's much changed that the statement that nurses are like the handmaidens to the doctors, that when we're birthing in a hospital, you're not going to see the doctor for the full duration of the labor. You might not see the midwife for the full duration of the labor, but who you will see is, if you have a doula or if you have a birth attendant, or the nurses. The nurses are going to be there for the full duration. However, within the system, the patriarchal system, the nurses do not have any power in that system to change things from what the orders are from above for them. And so if we try to negotiate with a nurse to change something, that person is not in a position to change things. So a key resource that I introduced up in the North maybe 30 years ago, and many of you may work with this, but it's to really, really use this resource. And this is the birth plan. So a birth plan is where a mother, a father, together with the person who has the authority within the system. So that may be the midwife or that may be the doctor. And we go through point by point by point of every single aspect of labor, active labor, birth of baby, care of baby. Because one of the things, back to when I said we're acculturated by Hollywood movies, we go into birth thinking that our doctor, our nurse, our midwife is going to have telepathy and know what our needs are and know what we want. Well, we don't even know what we want because we haven't been in birth before, if this is our first baby. So when we have a birth plan and it's very precise down to how we want to be supported, we want to move, we don't want baby removed, we want baby on skin, we want to keep the placenta attached, all these different things we've gone through point by point by point, long before we're birthing. And then the doctor signs off on it. So here's the key, because within the system, then here's an example. I was up in the Arctic and it was a hospital birth, a young Indigenous woman, 16 years old, and there was 15, 16 of us in the birthing room. And along comes Nurse Nancy and she says, oh, all these people, they need to leave, get out of the room. And, I could have gone over to Nurse Nancy and I could have argued with her, but in diplomacy and coming into a right relationship with her and using the birth plan, I approached her quietly, diplomatically, and I said, hey, did you know that there's a birth plan that the doctor signed off on? Oh, no, I didn't know that. She gets to save face. And then I'm able to say, did you know that our birthing mother, she lives actually down the road with these 13 people in a one-room building. And for her, it makes her feel at ease to have these 13 people there. And the doctor signed off on them being there. And suddenly Nurse Nancy goes, oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. Now that I see the doctor's signatures here, then I'm not going to get in trouble. And now we can proceed in the way that we're going forward. And of course, now you can imagine many, many years with my practice, and I'm there in the hospital, I'm going to see Nurse Nancy many, many times, and she's going to know that she can trust that I'm going to be respectful of her to be as empowered as she can be within that system. And that then she can start to perhaps think about herself as being a change agent within that system. Now, bringing myself forward to present moment, I live in the town of Nelson, BC, which has been declared a center of excellence for maternity care in British Columbia. And this was an interesting thing how this came about. In the year 2000, our government was looking at cuts on all across the board in various different parts of government agencies. And so they wanted to take the obstetricians and all the birthing rooms out of our local hospital. We're in mountainous terrain, and they were going to put the obstetricians over in the industrial town, which isn't geographically centered, but because the money was there. And so we, as midwives and birth attendants, we got active as activists. And we brought in a reproductive care team to do a full assessment of our reproductive care in our community. And not only did they say, you need to keep the obstetricians, you should add an obstetrician and upgrade the birthing rooms with water and other things. But then that's when they said, this is a center of excellence for maternity care. And in fact, anyone in this whole province can learn from what it is that you're doing. So here's some of the things that we are doing here. We have programs that help women who are pregnant. If you don't have the right nourishment of really good foods, there's a way of being enrolled there. We have yoga and emotional and mental health support for women who are pregnant. We have a multitude of different options for birthing with registered midwives, non-registered midwives, people who are birthing out in the cabin on their own, people who are birthing in hospital, women who are making choices for whom they're going to birth with, where they're going to birth and how they're going to birth, that we have excellent postpartum care and lactation support. We have incredible different alternative schools for bringing up our children. In fact, if people are familiar with the magazine Mothering that comes out of the United States, Nelson was declared one of the top 25 places to bring up children in all of North America. And part of that was, you know, organic markets and alternative schools and lots of health and recreation and sports alternatives, beautiful healthy settings. And so anyway, so what we came to realize is that we have something that's worth not only keeping and preserving, back to that sense of values, but also that this is something that others can learn from, because we have fiercely protected the value of the life givers, the value of bringing in the new generations here to this place. And yeah, I feel really privileged to be able to be here and be practicing here within this community here. So I now want to just bring up that really when we look at birth, it's a universal human experience. We've all been born of woman, and it is a full holistic experience of the body, of the mind, of the heart, of the soul, of the spirit. It's not just one thing that's physical that we look at medically. It's on all levels of our being that we are birthing. And in fact, I use the metaphor of birth for, you know, the times that we're in terms of the world and all the crises that we're facing, is to say, okay, we've done this before. We know how to birth. What do? We breathe. We get support. You know, we trust that we have what we need to birth this baby out, and know that when we're going through something difficult, something beautiful is coming through. And so one of the things that I've come to learn, and again, this has been in my many years I lived in Indigenous community, is to recognize the presence of the ancestors at birth and the presence of the incoming soul at birth, and really trusting that there is deep-seated wisdom there. So one of the first experiences I had with this was in a Inuit community, and there's a belief system there that there's no separation between birth and death and the continuum of life. And so as the baby is being born, everybody within the room is calling forth the name of the last person of the family who's died, who was Grandpa Charlie. Excuse me. So everyone in the room is saying, Grandpa Charlie, come, we're welcoming you. We're ready for you. Come on, Grandpa Charlie. And down the birth canal comes, it doesn't matter if it's a male or a female, it's a baby girl who's born, but it doesn't matter. They all say, Grandpa Charlie, here's your pipe and here's your slippers. And they call this child Charlie and treat this child with the utmost respect of an elder, that this child is the embodiment of this soul that has wisdom and knowledge. And we see that in the case of, for example, many of you may know the story of the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, who is the current Dalai Lama who's alive now. When he was age 15, the Chinese army was about to attack Tibet. And he went and he meditated all night, and he emerged the next morning, and he told his advisors who were telling him we must leave. He said, no, I know what to do. We will stay. I am the 14th incarnation of the Dalai Lama. And he expressed that he had full remembrance of all of the 13 incarnations of being the Dalai Lama, all the way back to the year 1391. And therefore, he knew that he had the wisdom, he had the knowledge within himself to be able to meet this moment, because he'd met it many, many times before. And so we come full circle, and we learn that the core of changing Western culture and changing Western culture about the medicalization of childbirth is to return to the remembering of our wholeness, of our Indigenous soul and our place on the back of this living, breathing Mother Earth, to remember our feminine values. And the key to this for our human species is repairing our relationship to the feminine within ourselves, within our cultures, and within our births. And so if there is ever a moment we need to place a test in front of us, we can place the test of these feminine values and ask, is it relational? Is this culture, or is this thing being asked of me at birth, is it relational? Is it respectful of being in right relationship? Is it embodied? Is it asking me to be fully embodied in my being? Is the person asking me this fully embodied? Does it respect life givers? Is it nurturing? Is it kind and caring? And is there fierce protection for the life givers and for the next generations? And so now I'm going to bring you back to how I introduced myself. Is the key, one of the keys is in remembering. So if I remember being burned at the stake or being buried alive for having aspects of knowing the mystery of birth and being a midwife in previous lives, that's not the story. There's no blame here. The key there is that I remember who I am lifetime to lifetime. There's an ancient Mexican proverb that says they tried to bury us and they didn't know that we were seeds. So in my remembering and coming forth in my remembering, I know any moment I can reach deep down inside and know that I carry that wisdom of those wisdom traditions that have carried forth all the way through since, the dark ages when I first began to do this kind of work. So there we go. I think Connie is saying that she is going to be going to the next room, but this is actually perfect. This is perfect timing to ask any questions or give any comments at this moment. I wanted to thank you, Connie, for introducing me. Yeah, I would love to hear from any of you if you have questions or comments. I could talk birthing till the cows come home. It's my favorite subject. And while I'm waiting to see if you have something that you want to say. I forgot to mention, or Connie forgot to mention that I'm one of many authors of a brand new book that came out last month. It's called Womb to Thrive, The Missing Keys to Healing Ourselves, Our Families, and the Planet. And there's 26 of us authors in this book that we come from all walks of life, from all across the planet, in all the different ways of birthing and pregnancy and conception, and also early parenting to support our early parents. And I know that it just actually has become an international bestseller. It just came out last month and it's already an international bestseller. So we actually have a Womb to Thrive Global Summit that's going to be happening every weekend between May 14th and 31st, where you're going to meet a lot more people like me who are doing this kind of work. And yeah, if you find yourself stuck in the system and feel powerless within the system or within the cultures that we've created, just know that, we could be fish that could learn how to breathe air rather than just water. It's that we are empowered, that we can change the things within our systems. And I know that a lot of the ways of working as activists is to make wrong and to blame. And I'm suggesting or proposing that a way forward is to come into right relationship with those within the system. And first of all, by being in right relationship with ourselves and knowing that we carry the keys, we carry the knowledge, we carry the wisdom. So just wanting to see if there's, oh, here we go. I guess I wasn't in the chat. Here we go. So here we go. This is Alexandra. Hi. I just got my PhD in sociology and my research centers on home birth moms in Hawaii. Oh, and I would love to connect. Okay, great. That sounds fantastic. I'll write down your information. That's actually a very interesting thing though, that you bring that up, is that again, back to culture, most of us are acculturated, at least in North America and in Western countries, and it's spread around the world. And I believe a lot through Hollywood movies, to really see ourselves birthing in hospital as being the model. And absolutely, when we need that backup, and for those who choose that, it's okay. But when we unintentionally think that we're choosing that for a certain set of reasons, and then we have birth done to us, excuse me, that my background in something that I believe firmly in is, if anyone is coming into birthing, is to see if you can get your start with midwives and midwives who are part of home births. The very first birth I attended was in Amsterdam, and the practices in Holland are exemplary. Like when I asked a question, well, what about women who don't have prenatal care? You know, what if you're a refugee or an immigrant woman who comes and moves here? How is the system for them? And literally every single professional will just look at me like I was crazy, because in that birth culture, it would just be just unthinkable that women would not do the prenatal care, because it's free, because it's accessible, and because people are acculturated to do the care during the prenatal period. And if a woman is in a high risk situation, we work with her relationally and in a nurturing way to shift those risks. Maybe it's something to do with her foods that she's eating. Maybe it's something to do with the mental stresses she's under. There's so much that we can do. And that's why, you know, I don't know where they're at right now, the Netherlands, but they were with the lowest infant mortality and the lowest maternal mortality rates in the world when I went and spent my thesis year there. So that's, yeah, congratulations on centering on home birth. I will say, on my architectural thesis, just a little side note here, is that at the end of, well, it was probably 2 or 3, 4 years that I just became immersed in birth. And that very first birth that I attended in the Netherlands, you know, I'm drawing the environment because I'm an architect. And yeah, sure, I threw my books to the ground, and I just knew to breathe every single breath with the mum the whole entire night. And something inside of me awakened that I remembered that I'm a midwife. I remembered this way. And so in the subsequent years that followed, I was going to make a point here. Now, where did it go? Oh, geez, I get lost into birthing here. Oh, where did it go? Well, just the fact that my first birth that I attended was in such a beautiful way that I was not acculturated in any way in hospital births. And so it's no problem for me to be in a hospital setting and observe and witness, but not be attached, not have my whole being looking at the medicalized or at the sickness model of the way that our bodies are. So in fact, when I came back, oh, now I remember the point. Thank you, JoAnn. When I came back to Canada, I was fully fledged involved now in birthing as a birth attendant, but I still had an architectural degree to finish, and I still needed to show some kind of a project. And I wanted to just draw a sweet little picture of a house and say, that's my conclusion in 4 years of research, traveling 3 times around the globe into all these birth cultures, is that the home, the same bed where the baby is conceived, the same bed where one feels so relaxed, and at home you have the smells and the feel and the touch of what it is that your home environment is going to be the most relaxed place where you're going to be able to give birth. And but I knew I wouldn't get my degree if I just did a little drawing of a house. And so all the other architects had these drawings like this, square drawings, and I had a 16-foot round mandala with a fetus in the middle and these images of goddesses with pendulous breasts and images of a birthing center in the Arctic. And even so, I was actually, they did not pass my thesis. It was just too far out there at the time. But I knew that I was onto something and that what I had was before its time. And I came back a couple times. I had to redo my thesis, and eventually I did do the square drawings because I knew that if I wanted to change the system, I needed to meet those within the system within a language that they could understand without compromising my own integrity and my own sense of value. And I really feel that the key to the wisdom lies within each of us. And, you know, that definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. You know, what if we just all learned to come into valuing the feminine and valuing the ways of being relational and kind and caring, and to be embodied in our bodies, and to respect the life givers, and to respect the inner mystery, the things that we do not know, that we can't fit into the boxes, and to fiercely protect our life givers and the future generations. So on that, I think I will let you go. And oh, here's something. Is there another? Okay, here we go. Oh, here we go. Here's from Colleen. Your talk helped to heal my spirit. I had, if this is okay, Colleen, I had a very traumatic birth and postpartum experience, a home birth turned hospital heartache with my 1-year-old son. And I'm still really in need of healing from it. I haven't found any resources in upstate New York. May I email you? Yes, you can. I'll give you my email. It's JoAnn Lowell, JoAnn, no E, LOWELL @gmail.com. And one thing I want you to know, Colleen, or anyone who is in that kind of position, is that when I spoke about you know, being in the place of working, when I work with mothers and fathers before their birth, part of the birth preparation is also if there's been previous births for this mother, and if there's been trauma in that birth, that we want to work through that trauma. And I'm really sorry, but there's no easy pill to take. There's this saying with trauma work is we need to feel to heal. But the key is that we don't go and re-experience all of the trauma. What we do is we recognize there's trauma locked in our bodies, and in a very, very calm and gentle and nurturing way, we do a process of finding the safety within our being, within our body. And then we slowly start to let this pent up energy out. And then we keep coming back to this safe place. And it's one of my specialties of the work that I do, because how can we relax when we were breathing at the beginning? How can we come to this birth in a relaxed way where we can let things go if we're still pent up for what came before? And I haven't ever had any moms that have worked with me that might have previously had a cesarean section or a lot of interventions or a lot of traumatic things happen, that when we do the work in preparation, that the inner preparation is just as important, that we find that we have beautiful natural outcomes. And each one of us who is a woman, who is a life giver, who gives birth, I believe that we should, at the end of birthing our children, be able to say, I'm powerful. I have it in me. I have the capacity to hold life, to bear life, to give life. And that because I'm so connected to that, I'm connected to my heart. I'm connected to being a fierce protector of this next generation. And how is it that I can do the work that I'm going to do is because I need to do the work that I need to do in order to be, a mother to the next generations that are coming. And I think my daughter is here with us today. And I'm glad you're here, Asia, that, I believe that we've had a wonderful journey together through how it is that we've come forth in this way of really valuing the feminine. So I think we're probably going to sign off now. I've been made host, and I think there's another session that's starting in a few seconds. I want to thank you for coming. And my website is soulmedicine.one, O-N-E. And if you want to know about breathwork or breathing, thebreathingclassroom.com. You can go and register and get a manual and all kinds of breathing exercises there. And I hope that this has been of value for you. And I really look forward to connecting if you wanted to get a hold of me one-on-one. I enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you to the organizers for bringing us all together. Take care.